Thank you for inviting me to address this gathering. I would like to thank Ravidu, the convener of the Medical Faculty Students Action Committee, for inviting me to speak this afternoon. Now I'm here, I teach community medicine at the Faculty of Medicine, University of Jaffna, and I'm also here as a member of the Kuppi Collective. So the Kuppi Collective is a group of university teachers and others who stand for free education and against privatization of education. We also challenge nationalist discourses and thinking within the education sector and outside it. So today I am mainly wanting to talk about free education and what KDU means for free education. So when we talk about free education, because I'm based at a state university, right, it brings to my mind our students actually who come from various disadvantaged backgrounds, right, especially the universities in the peripheral areas have more of these kinds of students. So their parents may be security guards, drivers, laborers, domestic workers. Now these students often struggle through medical school, but once they graduate with an MBBS degree, they enjoy all the privileges and opportunities associated with becoming doctors. And they and their families achieve some kind of social mobility. So, as Professor Sumati Sivamohan of the Kuppi Collective once wrote, I just want to quote that, free education does not serve everybody equally. But over the years and across the decades, it has come to represent the hope of a vast majority for a better place in our society. So this beautiful picture of free education has been distorted actually by the various governments and the media who disseminate images of protesting students, and you see it all on social media, wasting taxpayers' money. The elite people in Colombo and others are trying to convince us that private higher education will solve the problems in our state universities. So today especially I want to talk about KDU, and not only KDU but also other recent efforts to privatize medical education and what that means for free education. I will also talk about the possible consequences of these reforms and why the justification, as Ravindu also talked about just now, the justification for private medical schools, they don't really make sense. And I will discuss some alternatives. So what is the problem here, right? So KDU began to enroll fee-paying local students last year. Since then, several batches have been recruited because they are recruiting more than one batch per year. Then this year, the government temporarily ended the enrollment of fee-paying local students, but then they came, we don't really know the details, but came under some pressure to remove this restriction. So then the call for applications was put out again in July, right, early July, and the application deadline was 18th of July, just 2 weeks. Right, we don't know who knows about this application deadline and who actually could put together an application within 2 weeks. So then enrollment has been restarted. So then we are told by various sources that the restriction was removed, right, because of the lower number of applications from military cadres and international students. And also there were reports in the newspaper of a fundamental rights case won by students who planned to apply to KDU. But apparently the same kind of fundamental rights case against students who could not afford KDU were rejected. So you can see where this is coming from. Then, so what I'm arguing here is, enrolling fee-paying students at KDU is dangerous because it is setting a precedent that other private medical schools can follow. So you may all already know this, but the foundation for establishing private medical schools has already been set, because we have now the accreditation unit, which is supposed to be an independent unit under the Sri Lanka Medical Council. This unit can receive applications from any medical school, including private medical schools. that would like to become established in Sri Lanka. So what is important is the same standards that apply to state medical faculties as outlined in the minimum standards for medical education, they also apply to private medical schools. So most medical professionals, I'm talking about medical professionals because these are the people I talk to, they oppose private medical schools of low standards, low quality. But they don't oppose or object to private medical education. So it is widely believed that these minimum standards will prevent establishing low quality medical schools. But what is often not considered is the consequences of those private like if we have private medical education or like fee-levying state medical schools, what that will mean for our state medical faculties, and I'm going to talk about that later. So anyway, now this accreditation process, we are seeing the fruits of the reforms to that accreditation process. We have Lyceum and NSBM and all, and others awaiting accreditation. And the story is that, you know, some of them have, they have got the required standards, and there is just some restriction being posed by the government. But I don't know really this is what we are hearing. So then let me talk about the consequences of having these fee-levying state or private medical faculties. So let's first talk about the issue of access. So who will be able to afford the fees at KDU? And I'm guessing other private medical colleges are going to be even more expensive. So the fees at KDU for the 2025-26 intake is Sri Lankan rupees 17.5 million for the 5-year course. So this has increased by 5 million. Last year the website said 12.5 million in 2024, but now it's 17.5 million. So it has increased by 5 million. So the call for applications does not refer to any scholarships or grants for those who may not be able to afford those fees. Second, we do not know on what basis they select students. So unlike in the UGC universities, which admit students based on transparent criteria, that is A-level results, the process at KDU raises questions. So according to the KDU website, the admission criteria include having followed the bioscience stream, biology, chemistry and physics, and obtained a minimum of 2 credit passes, C's, and 1 simple pass, S. So, or equivalent at the London A-levels and so on. And they should have got them in one sitting. So this is actually what is in the minimum standards of medical education. But these admission criteria mean that anyone who did the bioscience stream, right, any one of them, that means a large number of students are qualified to apply to KDU, right? And also we have to think, okay, the equivalent in the London A-levels exams and all are actually, if you think about it, compared to the local A-levels, this 2 C's and S cutoff is quite low in terms of how people talk about London A-levels. So there are a whole lot of people. Then we are told that 100 students are admitted each batch from the pool of these applicants. So despite being a state institution, the KDU does not provide us any information about the process they follow to select the candidates from those shortlisted, except to say that they will face an interview. So we know, it is very well known that interviews are biased towards privileged students who can better perform at an interview because they may be good in English. They will also have participated in more extracurricular activities and so on. So apart from the privileged students whose parents can easily afford these fees, others may also apply, So there may be people who will sell their assets, their land and go into debt for an MBBS degree. But now from all these students, we don't know how these 100 have been selected. So the admission criteria of 2 C's and 1 S are it's very unjust because they enable those with very ordinary A-level results and with maybe soft skills to perform at an interview. Now they will be able to pay fees and get entry to a medical school in Sri Lanka. So this undermines the principle of free education, which has served to minimize whatever the problems, minimize disparities or differences in access. So now in other countries, right, medicine has become a very elite profession due to interview processes that rank applicants based on soft skills and involvement in extracurricular activities, community service, and various other achievements. But these opportunities are usually available to certain kinds of people, right? Not everyone will have them. So second, right, okay, so that's the problem there with the admission criteria. So we don't know who is actually getting access to this, right? So the second problem is there will be no district quotas or similar equity enhancing, making it fair mechanisms to get into the private medical schools. So the district quota system is an affirmative action policy implemented by the UGC, which tries to compensate for the urban-rural differences in access to general education. So there are various problems with it, yes, but it is still something that increases the opportunities for people in peripheral districts. So I want to just, I don't know whether it's here. So you probably can't see this, but I just want to say here, so this is undergraduate admissions by academic program and admission policy. This is 2020-21 because the UGC is actually not putting out all the latest data. So this is for 2021. And if you look at this, this is medicine. And then they have merit and other. Okay, so if you look at this is all the districts, right? And so if you look at this difference between merit and other, I have just underlined some. If you look at the which districts have got a big difference between merit and other, where other is the, the bigger number, right? You will see, now I have marked in red, right? I will just go up and see, right? Matale, Nuwara here, Kilinochchi, Mana, Mulethiu, Vaunia, Trincomalee, Batticaloa, Ampara, Puttalam, Anuradhapura, Polonnaruwa, Badulla, Monaragala. So you can see very clearly the others there are more intake from the merit, but if you see the higher numbers are getting in from the district quota from these disadvantaged districts. So, because private medical schools of any fee-levying one like the KDU enroll students based on their ability to pay fees, when private medical education becomes, like if there's more of it, the demographic background of the medical professionals could change, where the proportions entering from disadvantaged districts will be less represented. So that is something that we should all think about. So then the other question is, can we really argue that students in Colombo, Kandy and all are disadvantaged by the district quota? Because now everyone's talking about, this district quota is not allowing very high performing students from urban areas to enter university. Now if you look at these numbers again, right? If you look at this now, merit, Colombo, 179. And if we compare merit, I don't know where is the large, anyway, I can't compare it because of course the population is greater in Colombo. But if you look at that, right, the vast majority of students are actually coming from these very advantaged districts, right? So the district quota, so of course, as Ravind also mentioned, may need to be revised and improved to ensure all students who require this kind of additional support receive it. So for instance, like the urban poor, like maybe there are very poor people in Colombo and places like that, those people also, there should be some way to include them. So then third, we have the issue, the third problem that I would highlight. So I talked about access, then I talked about this no equity enhancing mechanisms. The third one I want to talk about is the possible brain drain or, movement of academics from state to private medical faculties. So when we discuss private medical schools, we rarely connect how the expansion and development of private medical schools could affect the state medical faculties. So by considering state and non-state in the same way, right, in the minimum standards and the accreditation processes, we are really not looking at this important issue. So it is believed then again that MBBS degree programs the quality can be assured because of these minimum standards. So there are standards for minimum qualification for student admission, staff requirements, hospital bed numbers, bed occupancy, etc. So let's consider an example. In terms of academic staff, the standards specify that MBBS degree awarding institutions should have a teacher-student ratio of 1 teacher for every 14 medical students. That means also including the permanent academic staff and extended faculty of specialists in affiliated teaching hospitals and other healthcare settings. They also include provisions for balance between full-time and part-time academic staff, but they don't mention anything about the numbers. So as you know, even today, certain state medical faculties are struggling to gain SLMC accreditation because of this shortage of staff, etc. in their professorial units. So I want to, before I get to that, right, just to say, now private medical schools, and we can see some of this already happening in KDU, would need to rely on these retired medical professionals. They are mostly those people are in KDU, or consultants at teaching hospitals, or academics at state medical faculties. So the minimum standards do not place limit on the teaching hours. So it will be like, doctors going for dual practice in both public and private sectors. University teachers will also be able to divide their time between public and private medical schools. Sometimes if the benefits and all are very good, right, they might move all together, right, because the salaries are going to be much, much higher. So if academics from state medical faculties then start participating in this dual practice, we don't have any guarantee that their primary commitment will be with the state medical faculties. Right? We have already seen this with private practice of doctors. So this kind of movement is likely again to affect peripheral universities more. And I want to show why. So if you see this, right, you have the Colombo medical faculty from 2016 to 2021 and the Jaffna medical faculty, the increase in the new admissions. So Colombo increased from 195 to 233 in 2021, and Jaffna increased from 136 to 184 between 2016 and 2021. This is based on UGC statistics. So here I have included students per permanent staff member. This has maintained 7:1, maintained at 7:1. But here students per permanent academic staff member has gone from 12:1 to 19:1, right? So this is, you can see that the Jaffna medical faculty, the number of students per faculty member has increased very dramatically. So, but, the thing is, because Colombo is based in Colombo, the faculty is based in Colombo, they can maintain that ratio, right? Because so many people want to join because, they can leave the ministry and stay in Colombo. But if you take Jaffna, right, there's no reason for them to leave the ministry and join Colombo because there's such a shortage of doctors also in the Jaffna district. So they can continue to find places in the Jaffna district and remain there, right? So then there is no incentive for these people to join the academic staff of the faculty. So, and also in the Ministry of Health, everyone knows because of the overtime, the salary is about 1.5 lakhs higher, right? So then there's really no incentive to join. But the minimum standards requires this 14:1 fulfilled, but that requirement is fulfilled because we have so many of those in the hospitals around Jaffna teaching. So now there's no standard given between the ratio for permanent to temporary, not temporary, extended faculty, right? So then what can happen is these private medical schools also can function relying mainly on the permanent academic staff of state medical faculties plus those extended faculties in the hospitals. So then because they provide much higher salaries, right, there will be, once again we'll see that this kind of problem is going to be felt much more in the peripheral universities than perhaps in Colombo. Then the other problem is that these private medical faculties, right, schools, they will be able to invest in resource intensive, like have much more hi-fi hospitals affiliated to them, right? Some of them later onwards will be coming from abroad, Manipal and places like that can set up universities here and faculties here, right? So then there's no guarantee that if those kinds of attractions are there, many of our academic staff may move there even in the clinical category, right? So it's really a dangerous trend. Then private medical education also is being subsidized by the people. Okay, because of the required hospital beds and occupancy rates, right, in the minimum standards, private medical schools will have to rely on public hospitals for clinical training. For instance, now we hear that the Chilau Hospital has been upgraded to serve as a teaching hospital for Lyceum. So why should the public subsidize private for-profit education, right? What kinds of compensation will be offered? How will they benefit the public? We are not informed of these details or anything about these MOUs that are being signed. Then, maybe I'll skip that, but it's a very dangerous thing if they start. Another thing to look out for is funding private education or KD or whatever, these fees through student loans. Because, if we have a lot of student loans being given, it is unlikely at these kinds of, millions and millions of rupees that these graduating doctors will be okay staying, like working only in a public hospital at our salaries, right? So if you have to repay a loan, you need much more. So then there may be unintended consequences, like, student loans may force people to join private sector, encourage leaving the country even more than it is now, right? So we still don't know. Okay, that those things can also happen. So now, just to quickly go through what's the justification for privatization that's been given. One thing is as a solution to the shortage of doctors. That's what they're talking now. Everyone is leaving, so we need more doctors. But now we have several new state medical faculties that could address this problem. Now they're even saying there are no intern positions. So now when this competition increases, you know what's going to happen, right? If there are a lot of people who have, who are from Colombo, who can face interviews, who have all these things, now they'll have an interview process. I think it's happening for allied health sciences, right? So that kind of thing can happen even in medicine if we have a larger number of graduates than the number of internship positions. So whether the expansion of opportunities for fee levying, these medical education will actually address the brain drain is also a question. So it's unrealistic to imagine that people who have now paid these huge fees will want to, as I mentioned earlier, stay in these faraway places and all that. They may be more likely to leave or even leave the country. Even if they do remain here, right, that's what I was saying earlier, they might not serve in those areas. Then this approach to increasing the medical workforce will not address the issue of maldistribution. That's a huge problem. There are so many doctors and other health professionals in Colombo compared to outside areas. So are there no other options? So can't we take steps to retain the doctors who are leaving the country? Can we not get them to serve a minimum number of years before they leave, since their studies have been sponsored through the public purse? These things can be done, but they are not looking into these alternatives. So this discussion about doctor shortages also does not make sense because, again, the real shortage actually lies in other areas. You all would all know that, we have very huge shortages in nurses and other kinds of health professionals. So is the focus on medical education because it addresses the aspirations of elite people? Or is it because private medical schools are profitable and because parents are willing to pay huge fees to support their children to become doctors? Is this why there's such a push for private medical education? Then another one, I think Ravindu also talked about this, is this idea to enable high-performing students who have been so-called discriminated by the district quota to access education in Sri Lanka. This is being argued, including by medical professionals, on the grounds of fairness. Recently, in a newspaper article, an eminent professor who is also the president of Lyceum pointed out that in 2024 intake, the lowest cutoff used to enter state medical school was 1.476, and that 72 candidates who got higher Z scores could not enter state medical faculty. But can all students access the courses they would like to? These students also have the option of studying abroad. Why are we focusing on these students? Why aren't we focusing on the numerous students who will be deprived of private medical education, who can't access private medical education? We are not talking about them, we are talking about only those other people. Another point highlighted by the professor was the double standard created by the admission of international students to state medical faculties. So I am quoting, "It is difficult to comprehend the protests by some state medical students against establishing regulated private medical schools for local students deprived of admission to a state medical school when paid education is given to foreign students in the same medical school." So they are talking about the international intake to our faculties, right? But who was responsible for this decision? Was it the students or the UGC? And the person who's writing was recently the chair of the UGC as well. So in this way, right, opposition to privatization is made an individual problem, a problem of those who do not support, who are self-interested, who do not want other people to come up in society. That's how the protests against state medical faculties in the media, right? So very selfish people, right? But the question is, what would privatization would do to higher education in the country? What does it mean for our health system? Nobody is talking about that. Then another justification is given is to save foreign exchange that would be spent by students studying medicine abroad. So a higher education system, I think, should first address the need in the country. If reforms to the higher education system are known to be harmful, the economic justification should not matter. We do not need to follow unsuccessful models in other countries. So there are so many countries, right, including India, Nepal, Thailand, Malaysia, where they suddenly expanded the private medical education sector, and at the same time they increased there was a state-sponsored support for medical tourism, and they found that many people left the public sector to work in these commercial hospitals. So this is also something to look out for. So in these countries, it has not addressed the requirement of health systems, right, or the brain drain or anything. So it is also certain that the fees from now it is also not certain, that, if we have places like Manipal, for instance, right, there's no guarantee that that money they're talking about the economic argument, but that money could actually then go again to, wherever, India or whatever the country. These are all multinationals, right? So then that money will go to where those places are based. So in conclusion, expanding private medical education is clearly not in the interests of the public or the health system. We know that certain private entities have more or less cleared the accreditation process, and now they are waiting for the Ministry of Health clearance. The government has apparently put a halt to this process, but for how long? Will they cave in if Lyceum sues the government, right? So this can happen at any time. So giving the green light to KDU sets a precedent for other fee-levying medical schools in the state and private sector. This is especially a concern now because of the economic crisis. Funding for state universities have been cut. University administrations are saying generate your own funds, right? So there were plans to set up a fee-levying medical faculty at Vaunia University, but that also seems to be temporarily halted. So we hear that KDU has a huge loan to repay, but KDU is funded by the Ministry of Defense. Why can't the huge military budget be put to that? Or they should come up with some alternative mechanism to repay the loan. This starting private fee-levying education is not the solution for that. We should go in the direction of less militarization, not more. So my opinion is the government should take over the KDU. Maybe it could be used as a clinical training facility temporarily for, students. We are hearing of students in Sabaragamu, Wayamba and so on who are having some problems. They could also save the money they have allocated for the development of clinical faculties there, if they are really out of funds. So my final message is, the expansion of private medical education has been resisted so far by the student movement and others concerned about quality and equity in medical education. So I'm asking all of you to please continue to do that. But you are resisting powerful and elitist forces. You need to have the public on your side. And for this to happen, I think you must also highlight the links between free education and free health, and also stand for protecting free health. Because I often hear people talking about how medical students get free education, but then they leave the country or make money through private practice. So if there are no changes in these areas, I wonder whether the public will listen to this message, right? So thank you very much again for inviting me.